Welcome to Integrity Inspire, your daily dose of inspiration and motivation, featuring the bright and talented members of the Integrity Marketing Group family. Now, here's your host, Integrity co-founder and CEO, Brian W. Adams.
Hello, everybody. Thanks so much for joining today's Inspire podcast. So listen, we've learned from a lot of inspiring partners here on the Inspire podcast. I'm so excited to welcome my friend Mike Pfeil to the Integrity family. His business is an incredible business. What he's built at Allegiance Financial Group in Bel Air, Maryland is truly a remarkable company. He's gone through a lot of ups and downs in his business career and in his life, and I can't wait for you to learn from what he's gone through in ways that he's overcome adversity and really climbed to incredible heights. And so thank you so much for joining us, Mike. Really appreciate you, man.
I appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
Hey, this is fun because we've gotten to know each other over some time, and this is fun being able to just kind of share backgrounds. Now, we were just talking about where you grew up and kind of your upbringing. So you were telling me that Pfeil, the lineage of that is German.
Yes.
So tell us about that, man.
When I was a kid, I lived in Germany at two different stints. My father was in the military, and a lot of people, they look at my name and no one can ever pronounce it correctly. So that's how you know if people know me or not. Living there, you would see the name Pfeil all over the place. So yeah, it's a German-based name, but you look at me and people look at me, and I can tell people they want to know my ethnicity, but they'll ask, where are you from? But that doesn't tell you my ethnicity. And then you look at my last name and that really throws people off. But I didn't find out I was adopted until I was 20 years old. So when I lived in Germany, that's when I realized that, I do have a German last name. It is a strange spelling. That's why, people look at it and they can't pronounce it right. And the whole I before E and so forth doesn't fly. And like you said, Pfeiffer, right? So people look at it and they don't ever
I said Michelle Pfeiffer. Yeah. Is she German as well?
I don't know.
That's whatever happened, Michelle Pfeiffer. I always loved Michelle Pfeiffer.
That I don't know. You and I were talking about how much we both love watching movies. But,
I know we've got so many things in common. Yeah. So you grew up in Germany on a military base. What branch was your dad in?
My father's in the Army.
Army.
So when you're in the military like that, you grow up, you move every 3 years. So we lived in California and Texas, Maryland twice, Germany twice, and you're up and moving every 3 years. I remember specifically being in 3 different first grades. That was like normal back then. But when
three different first grades.
Yeah, because you would go one place while they're getting your housing prepared and ready for you to move to the new location. So we would, go stay with my grandmother for a little bit and get ready for that. And so we would leave one place, go to California, stay with my grandmother, and then we'd go to Germany or whatever. And so you're just moving. When I met my wife and I told her about the way that I grew up and lived, she was like, "That's weird. Don't you think it's strange?" And I said, "Now you say it, maybe it is, but it was normal."
It had to be, for somebody who grew up in, one small town and never, did much outside that town. I can see that there had to be a lot of benefits to growing up the way you did, because it forces you to make friends, right? Especially at an early age, going through. A first grader's 7 years old,
yeah.
6, 7 years old.
Yeah.
So having to, really assimilate in and try to become friends with people had to be hard in one way, but had to really help you long term in so many ways as well.
Yeah, I think when you're going through it, it was just the way you lived. So you didn't really think about it a whole lot. You just would walk into a new school and they would introduce you, and you go around and meet some people, and then you're friends. But then 3 years later, then boom, you're out and you're moved to another place, a whole other state or another country, So looking back at it now, I think it is strange. When I came back to Maryland, I was 15 years old, and it's just strange when you meet people and they've known people all their lives. And then being in like 8th or 9th grade, and the longest time I knew anyone was, a month or a year, that is now looking back strange, but it was just normal living that way.
Yeah. So my wife's family came from Germany on her mother's side. My mother-in-law's family, her grandparents, after World War I, he fought on the German side in World War I, hated it. It was a super depressing time. In 1926, he and his new wife decided that they wanted to come to America. They boarded a ship. He'd had a bunch of like mustard gas issues, like back in World War I. My mother-in-law would tell us all these stories, or her mom would tell us stories about that. And so we said, why don't we just all go to Germany? And so with social media now, you can connect with people. Yeah. So my mother-in-law gets on social media, gets on Facebook, connects with the two different villages that her granddad grew up in and the grandmother grew up in. So we go back to this town, and we had connected with people. We didn't know what to expect. It's a village, right?
Yeah.
The entire village essentially comes out, and the mayor greets us.
Wow.
Like all this extended family,
yeah.
The Strobel family joins us, and we go back to like the church he was baptized in. We go to the town hall.
And this is her father?
My wife's granddad. So my mother-in-law's granddad, my wife's great-granddad.
Okay.
The mayor's like, can you come back to City Hall? So it's like, when I say City Hall, it's like a super small little place. We go back to City Hall, and he brings out this huge book, and he said, we have a record of every boy that from our village that went off into war. Wow. And your granddad is one of the only boys that we don't have a record of. Will you complete this? So they opened it up to his pictures on there.
Oh my goodness.
And so my mother-in-law and her sister start completing like the family history about where he went, what happened, how long he lived. And it was one of the most surreal moments ever. And we then go and have like dinner with them. In the middle of dinner, they start like singing these German songs. And my mother-in-law just starts bawling. She's like, I remember my granddad singing those songs. So we're drinking beer, dude. Yeah. Like, these aren't even my family. Like, I don't even know these people. We're drinking beer out of these big beer steins. People are singing, and we're all getting into it. Can't understand a word anybody says.
That's amazing.
And then they go, your turn. And we're like...
You didn't have any cool songs?
I was like, y'all want to sing like America the Beautiful? Like what? And we're like, all right, we're not singing. But it was so freaking cool. And then the next day we go to where grandmother grew up. And you know this, and we were talking about this recently. I'm super passionate about legacy planning.
Yes.
And how do you leave a lasting legacy, be remembered. And they brought all of that down.
That's amazing.
In such an important way for me.
What an incredible story.
Yeah. So speaking of incredible stories, you didn't start out in the insurance business. In fact, you've gone through a couple of different things. Tell us about how you got into business and then what led you to the insurance world.
I worked, when I got out of high school, I just worked a regular corporate job. I worked at a company and worked at their corporate office for years. I did that for 12 years. And while I was working, I was going to college. I was getting a degree in information technology. I would work all day, go to school at night. I got certified in programming from Microsoft. I was, doing a lot of that kind of work for the company. One day I went to my wife's job and saw these guys that were doing very well in sales. And I looked at my wife and I was like, if these guys can sell and make this kind of money, I know I can do it. And she was like, all this schooling you have, and that's not what you do. You're a programmer and you're pursuing a degree in this. And I just said, I want to do something different. So I stopped going to college. I was probably a semester short of getting my degree. And I just walked out and I got into the mortgage business. I started doing mortgages. And I did that for a very short period of time. And I looked at my wife and I was like, we can do this ourselves. Let's just open up our own company. We did that for 12 years.
How long had you been in the business before you opened up your own company?
Probably 6 months.
Wow.
6 months.
Your wife had to be like, hold on, you're quitting college, you're leaving all the things you've been classically trained for.
Yeah.
And now you want to start your own company?
Yeah.
Listen, that had to take some courage in a lot of ways.
It was a tough time, but she believes we can do anything. And when things are bad, she believes that we can overcome them. So we can do this ourselves. And that's what we ended up doing.
Good for you,
we did it for 12 years. Now, looking back now, because I'm more mature, back then I used to always blame it on the downturn in the economy and everything else as to why that business failed.
There was a lot of people, speaking of that really got into the mortgage business, were booming, crushing it. And then all of a sudden, you can't underestimate what happened when the economy turned, because in 08, 09, when it turned fast. And for us, a lot of people...
We thrived through that point, though.
Really?
Yeah, we did well through that. It wasn't until a couple years after that where we ended up failing. So to to answer your question, very, very long answer, that ended up failing, and I had to look around and figure out what I was going to do. I actually even thought I was going to go back and get a regular job. I'm like looking and trying to figure out what I was going to do. And after being self-employed for 12 years, you just can't work for anyone. I ended up finding insurance and got involved with it, and that's how I found the insurance business.
So there's a lot I want to touch base on that, but let's come back to a couple of points. So growing up in Germany, growing up on Army bases, moving around so much, had to be one of the best like training grounds for somebody to get into sales, don't you think? Because you're having to like get to know people. You have to overcome adversity in a lot of ways. So do you think that really helped you?
I think it did, because when you go into somewhere and you know no one and you're just meeting people, I think it's one of those things that allowed me. When I went into a home and the person was wealthy, and then an hour later I could be in a home where someone was on Section 8 housing, in a poor part of, I could relate with anyone. And I think a lot of that had to do with the way that I grew up and being able to talk and meet different people and, kind of fit into any situation, because you had to. You
had to, yeah.
You're a kid and you're being plucked from one home and dumped into another. So I think a lot of that probably has to do with having that ability, being able to just go up and meet with people. So I think it definitely helped me in the insurance business, because we meet all people. Yeah. Especially when you're buying leads, anyone could fill out and request insurance. And if they request it, it's your job to go out there and talk to them about it. But I think it did definitely help, getting into this business and being able to talk to anyone.
Yeah, look, I think it had to. I mean, I think that I think about my boys growing up right now, and having them, they get so comfortable kind of in their own little bubble that we're living in, and then like having to go, okay, like let's go meet more people or something, something like that. Like I think there's something about like being forced to like get to know people, and then that helps you in so many different ways. You hit on something else that's I think really important. I think a lot of people look at you today or me or other successful people in the business, and they go, man, they must have always been successful. It just must have really came easy to them, right? But when you say, look, I went through this, I had a great run, and then this business failed. Yeah. Did you learn more from the failure on that, or not? Like how did you take the learnings that you got of that first business, the failing of it, and going, I got to do something different in this world?
I learned a lot. Obviously, I learned everything not to do.
Hey, listen, that's, by the way, sometimes that's the best. That's the best lessons.
It was a hard lesson, but it was definitely a good lesson. I learned a lot about myself. But back then, in that business that I was in, I was younger and didn't really have any mentors back then, and didn't really have any guidance. And when you're doing well in a business and making money, you got a million friends, right? Everyone's around you. But then when things get difficult, everyone's gone and you're kind of left there by yourself. Yeah. But in going through that situation, and then when I got into insurance, I told myself a lot of different things that I wouldn't do. And I made sure that I didn't follow down that same path. So it was definitely a learning experience. And people ask all the time, do you wish that didn't happen? Do you wish you would have stayed in the business? Do you wish? And I'm like, no, because I went through all that, and it's led me to where I am today and who I am today. So as much as you look back, you can't have any regrets. You just have to take what you've learned and apply that to what you're doing now, and have what you're doing now work. So you can't look back and have any regrets, but definitely a learning experience.
Yeah, look, I think that that adversity really does a lot for you. One, it really teaches you what not to do. Yes, I mean, absolutely. Listen, that is a really, really valuable lesson. Like, don't do that, because that hurts, right? The other part is it also makes you really appreciate how good it is whenever you do realize that full potential. I know whenever I worked for an investment group that had insurance companies, I left and jumped into this in 2003. And look, I was set in my previous company. I mean, we had 3 private planes. I had like unlimited expense account. I knew for me, like, if I don't do something now, I'm going to get trapped here for the rest of my life. Yeah. which wouldn't have been that bad of a trapping. Don't get me wrong, but it was like, I know I need to try. There was something inside of me of like, I need to go out on my own. And then it sucked, dude. Let me just, there's no other word I can say. It just was hard.
Yes.
And thankfully I had Tom and Mike to mentor me. And look, two of my best friends in the world, two of the greatest humans in the world.
Did you ever think you made a mistake at that point?
Oh, look, there were so many times. I remember starting out, I had this boxer named Bosco. He was the coolest dog in the world. And Bosco would sit underneath my desk. And this was, I worked in this corporate office. Now I'm working at home. And back then, I mean, this is 21 years ago. It wasn't cool to work from home back then. Like, not like it is today. So I changed my doorbell so that people couldn't hear like ding, 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 or whatever. It was just ding. Because, otherwise people were like, do you work from home? Thank God Bosco didn't bark much. So, people,
That would have been weird back then.
Oh, it would have been weird. Like, you couldn't do it back then. Think about that. But thank God, whenever I partnered up with Tom and Mike in 2003 and they convinced me to jump over, one, I had like people I could bounce things off of and people I could ask questions of. But then it was like super hard. I remember the first month I made, I don't know, not very much money. And then I was traveling all the time. I looked at my expenses and I spent twice as much as I made.
That happens when you start a business.
Well, I made like less than, it was like $1,200 or something. And I spent like $2,400 and I was like, oh my God, I got to figure this out. And you're right. Like there is like this like investment that happens. But I remember like, for years I was borrowing money to survive, but I, like you, I knew I could make it. But it was so hard. The thing I love looking back, and I told our team this one day, there's this great band called the David Crowder Band that I just love. They had this song on this one album called Deliver Me. And it's like this like, it became like an anthem for me. It's like, deliver me out of this darkness, deliver me. And it's a faith-based song, but I remember just listening to Deliver Me over and over and over. Just like, God, please, like, help me get out of like this. Cause there was a lot of like, what did I just do? And
did you find yourself doing a lot more praying back then?
Oh my gosh, man. Look, I pray a lot anyway, but like back then I was, if you could go back and read journals and stuff, it was just like, oh my God. And
Brian, one thing, talking about journaling, I said the same thing. When I first got into this and it was difficult and I was journaling and obviously I got a lot more into my faith. My wife and I, we were going to church all the time to try to get through it. But I was journaling and I spoke at one of the conventions and I wanted people to understand like how it was when I first got into the business. I actually couldn't read the journal entry. I was on stage and I called Frank up on stage. I said, can you read this? But it was the same thing. It talked about, can I make it going through a dark time? And I couldn't even read the journal though, but I called Frank up on stage.
Because you were so emotional?
Oh yeah, it was just going back and reading it. I can almost relive how it was. So I know what you're talking about.
It's interesting. Journaling has been something I've done for years, and I do it every morning. And for me, my journal's more of like a prayer. Like it's more of like like chronicling a prayer of like, whatever's going on, like, man, this is going on. This is really tough. Like, give us wisdom, whatever. But I do that for me, and I don't think anybody will ever care to read those or ever need to read those. But if you went back to the kind of constant themes, it's been like that idea of like, God, I know you called me into this. Like, please deliver me out of what.
That's a great song too.
Yeah, it's an amazing song. I can't recommend it enough. It's off their Illuminate album, which is an amazing album. But going through that, looking back, and this is where. It's interesting. Like if you go back into time, the Israelites would have like these things that they call stones of remembrance, where they would say like, remember this, like, and they would set up like these stones so the future generations can go back and go, man, remember what they came out of. If you think about like the story we were just talking about, my wife's great grandparents. Like think about like how hard that had to be. I think they said when they got to America, they had like 25 cents in their pocket.
It's incredible when you hear those stories, and there's like, so many of them.
And then look, and people go, well, inflation adjusted. Okay, it's like $2.
Yeah.
Like it's still like it's not much, right? Yeah. But you start thinking about like all those points. For me, looking back, and I know you feel the same. Looking back, like I'm so thankful that I went through that because one, it makes you appreciate it more.
Absolutely.
And it also makes you understand and empathize with people when they're going through that to say like, you're going to be okay. And I was so thankful that I had Tom and Mike to sign on.
Were they already entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so they already had an incredible business with Premier. They were doing an amazing job. Mike's dad, Tom's father-in-law, started that in 1968. So it was a great business, but they had gone through some really challenging times. Repricing of long-term care, a lot of exits in long-term care. They were one of the largest groups in long-term care at the time. In 99, when that market really reshifted, they had to kind of remake themselves. So we were all kind of going through this, together. But, it's fun to have another group that you could actually do that with. So when you jumped into the insurance business, you joined Family First Life, which is one of the greatest groups in the world.
I agree with you.
I think Sean Mike, who also would tell you, he also went through a lot of challenges and gone through some hardships.
He shares them too.
And he does. And I think that makes you so much more relatable when people go, man, I didn't realize you had to go through that. But you jumped in there, but you also said, I'm going to go do something different. And then you came back. Tell us about that.
It was interesting. I got to FFL in 2015, and we all always hear, we see it every day, people talking about the grass is greener on the other side, or they say, why do you work so much there? The business isn't like that. It's, you shouldn't have to work that hard. We got better leads. We hear that all the time, So I was made an offer that I thought was obviously better for me and my family, and I left the company. So going through all that trouble, losing the business, coming to FFL, finally getting back on my feet, I left 3 years in. And I was gone for about a year, but it didn't take long. I was at that other company, and it took a very short period of time, maybe 3 or 4 weeks, to realize that I made a horrible decision. Things were not good. The team that went with me started to dissipate. They weren't there anymore. The volume that we were doing at that time went away. And it all had to do with the leadership and the culture, and it was gone. So I ended up leaving for about a year, and then I talked to Sean, and he asked me how things were going, and I said, Sean, things are not going well. Everything I was told was BS. There are no special leads. We're all told there's special leads out there, but they don't exist. So that's one lesson you can learn from me. They're not there. I already went looking for them. And he goes, what would you like to do? I said, I'd like to talk to you. I jumped on a plane the next day and went up to his office, and walking in there and creating so much trouble when I left, but Sean was sitting there with his arms wide open and hugged me when I walked in and said, I welcome you back with open arms. So
I love that, man. And that's Sean. That's Sean for you.
This too, when I came back, I sat and I told him, I said, things were so bad, like bills weren't paid, things weren't handled. I had no money for leads to get things rolling again. He personally gave me his credit card to get leads and get things moving again. God. He offered to fly down to Maryland and do meetings and things like that. But when I first came back, I think from leaving and going through all that difficulty, and now I'm like, man, I got buried in the mortgage business. I get into this, things are going well. Then I quit, make a bad decision. I think just mentally, I was so exhausted. So when he kept making offers, let me come down, I was like, I need some time just to regroup. But he was willing to do anything to help me get things back up and running. But people look at him all the time and they think what he's offering or what he's saying is all just for him. It truly isn't. He wanted to help me get into a better situation. So finally, after being back for 3 months or so, I kind of woke back up and got that passion back in me and wanted to start building again. So it was October of 19, and by January, so 90 days later, we had a team back in place, and we were able to hit vice president with the company. We were doing enough volume to be able to get moving again. And then shortly after that, COVID happens, but it actually ended up being a good thing. We kept rolling from there. Record year, man. I mean, it was hard to believe how successful the COVID season was in so many different ways. So a lot of people say the grass is greener. I grew up in the country. I grew up in a small town in West Texas.
some old people might say, the grass may be greener, but it's because they've got a septic tank.
Yeah, that's
so
it. That is true.
It may be because it's not true. It's a lot of the BS, as you said.
I learned the grass is greenest where you water it. You know,
that's
so
right.
Where you are, you just take care of where you are. It doesn't matter who your upline is. Doesn't matter the circumstances around you. When you're in the insurance business and you're an independent contractor, you're independent. It's completely up to you. So it's whatever you want to do with it, you can do it. And I learned that and had to grow the business again.
Look, I couldn't agree more with so many things. What advice do you have for people now who, kind of look at you, they're starting out? And this is what I would say is there's so many amazing young people coming up in this business that are going to be rock stars, bigger than any of us have ever dreamt of. I truly believe.
It is going to happen.
What advice and what would you say about, like, especially reading and any recommendations you got for them?
You know, when I got started in this, I've never heard about personal development or self-development, and I never really understood how, when you're an entrepreneur and you're in business, how important just the way you think is, and your mind and your mindset overall. And one thing that honestly changed everything for me was, really delving into that and having, like, when we're out running appointments, man, we were in our car a lot, and you had a lot of free time. So constantly having
you have a lot of free time, and you're being told no to a lot.
You are.
Like, the rejection
is unbelievable.
And then the time you have. Like, I remember the days of being in the car, like, door knocking and trying to, like, survive. I was in college, and I was like, I just quit my job because I, was like, I'm all in on selling insurance door to door. And then nobody tells you, like, by the way, it's going to be really hard, and you're going to hear no a lot.
It beats you up.
And you're going to be by yourself. You're on an island by yourself.
You are.
Right?
And downloading books into Audible and listening to something that's positive.
I love Audible.
That is what definitely got me through. That, and my wife telling me every day, you can do this. I think I wanted to quit every day for the first 6 months, but I'd go home and tell my wife, things weren't good. I don't know if I can do this. But having her every single day say, you can do it. You can do this. We can make this work. Having someone like that in your corner, but then also listening to books and just learning to cut out all the negativity, which is hard to do. You're listening to, you're getting you're getting rejected an awful lot. You hear people tell you that, working for yourself is you should go out and go get a job, and things aren't going your way. I know there were weeks when I got started with the business, I know I made less than minimum wage. Man, I'd leave at 6:30 in the morning, get home at 11 o'clock at night. At the end of the week, after expenses and buying leads and everything else, I wasn't making any money. But having my wife every single day tell me that it's going to work out, things will get better, cutting off, stop watching the news or stop listening to negative people. You cut negative people out of your life. That's probably the one recommendation that I could give to anyone that's getting, not just started in insurance, but just getting started in any business, is you got to change the way you think, because the way you thought in the past is what got you to that point that you are that day that you make that decision. And so for you to grow and for you to get further, you have to change. I think one great way to do that is by reading books or listening to books and just trying to be more positive overall. And that's what's going to get you through those difficult, tough times.
Yeah, look, I think the other thing I would say is reading books about successful people you admire, right? You and I were talking about this right before we started, about just different recommendations that you had that I'm excited to jump into. But you see, like, I just finished Elon Musk's book, the one that wrote about him. You look at Elon Musk, look, the dude is weird, man. Like, there's no other word for it, but he is the genius of our time.
Yes,
and you read that book, it's an amazing book, because you hear like all the things, like he was on the verge of bankruptcy so many times, and he challenged, like, it was like, there wasn't like an electric car like idea out there. He had to like invent, like create the battery.
Yeah.
He had to like create every part of the process, right?
Amazing story.
It's an amazing story. Or I'll give you a really good recommendation. I finished it. It's my third time to read it because I just love it so much. I read it a long time ago. Then I read it probably 10 years ago. And then I just picked it. I was moving some things around my office and I saw it and I was like, I'm going to read that again. Sam Walton's Made in America. It's on my desk right now. If you want to read a great book about like an American success story of somebody who was told no, rejected. I mean, they went through some hard times, and just like, and then you watch like the compounding effect of little things. So like when they first make their first $1 million or whatever, and now they make like $1 million a minute or something. I don't know what it is, but it's like these little compounding things that they did to like change so many different ideas.
Have you ever watched on the History Channel? There's a show in there called How America Was Made.
I love it, dude.
I've watched that three times.
Carnegie, Rockefeller, J.P. Morgan.
Yes.
Dude, if that's a great made. How America was made.
It shows you from the very beginning how this country started, and to see the adversity.
Oh my gosh, man!
Every one of them went through. They all went through it.
It's crazy.
But they're just grit and determination. I've watched it 3 times, and I think it's probably 8 hours. I mean, because it's all these different episodes.
But they break it down to like short episodes.
It's incredible.
It's one of those deals. I've watched it twice, I think. And you're disappointed when it's over.
Yeah.
You know it's a good one where you're like, crap, I got to find something else.
It goes all the way even through the woman who took care of the bird's eye, that whole fortune. I mean, Mary Post Pavilion. I mean, you see all that stuff that went on.
Dude,
I mean, every single one of those stories is incredible. And I think all businesses are the same way.
I think in that also, especially if you're getting started, man, it's so great to read those things or watch things like that, because you go, man, they were just normal people with big ideas, and they just stuck with it. And that's one of the biggest points of advice. And they also found other people that could come alongside of them. And that's one of the secrets, I think, to integrity is that we've all come together and said, look, if we all come together, we can all take care of more people. Rising tide will raise all boats.
Couldn't agree most.
And that's why I'm so excited to have great innovative thinkers like you joining the Integrity family to come in and say like, okay, here's where we are. Where can we go from here? The sky's the limit. I say we're just getting started all the time because I truly believe we are just getting started.
I agree with you 100%.
And now with great people like yourself and so many others coming in together with the heart of service to serve even more people, to get more people in this business and to go serve more people, there's no limit to what we can do, man.
I couldn't agree more.
Hey, buddy, it's been a joy to get to know you. I get inspired all the time on these podcasts. Today, I've gotten inspired to go back and watch How America Was Made. That I want to watch that again because
the movie you talked about too, Ferrari is great.
Oh, we were just talking about Ferrari, the movie. Like
I told you, you got to watch a movie.
Watch
the movie BlackBerry too.
BlackBerry, yeah.
Every company you think all of a sudden just came, but when you watch that hardship, or you were talking about the Uber movie, talk about all the hardships at the beginning and just realize that it's normal.
Well, in BlackBerry is a good example.
That's my wife's favorite phone. She's upset when it went away.
But you just made a good point. So what they did was so far ahead of everybody.
Yes.
And then they got disrupted by the iPhone.
Yes.
And then they ceased to exist.
That is correct.
You don't know anyone
now
that has a BlackBerry.
And
right?
they had like 80% of the market.
I think it was higher than that.
It was a ridiculous amount.
But that's the other part is you've got to stay innovating.
You can't stop.
You've always got to think about where are we going from here.
That is correct.
And that's one of the things that Integrity we're so passionate about, and that's why bringing in partners like you are the key to our success of growing, innovating, and serving more people. So thanks so much for joining us.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Hey, guys, I hope you're as excited as I am. You got a lot of homework to do now to go back and learn more about. We've given some good song recommendations. We've given some good life lessons, book, movies, TV shows. There's a lot that we can learn from just watching other people. And so going back, the other thing I love about this is when people share their adversity and how they overcame that. That's sometimes the most inspiring part. And so thank you for sharing that today.
I appreciate it.
And thank you for joining us. I hope everybody has an incredible week. God bless you all and look forward to seeing you all very soon on the next Inspire.